know what AI is being used in your environment. And then I wrote a GRC white paper, about exactly this governance risk compliance for AI. I wrote this, going back several months ago. What it does is it provides a framework for going and classifying AI. In other words, hey, is this AI domestic? Is this AI from overseas? Is this AI subject to regulation? Is it not? Who uses this? What type of data goes there? Knowing your environment is the first role of somebody who's in compliance. I have to know my environment. I then need to understand what I've paid for. Do we subscribe to these? Do we pay for them? If I'm leveraging Salesforce, for example, have I subscribed to Einstein? If I have, it could see some very interesting data that could be pertinent.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Risk Management Show podcast, where we explore critical trends and strategies shaping the risk, security, and leadership today. I'm your host, Boris Agranovich, founder and CEO at Global Risk Community, and our guest today is Trevor Welsh, VP of Product at Witness AI. So, Trevor, welcome to our Risk Management Show podcast today.
Boris, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I believe that we will have a very thoughtful conversation on the specific topic of hidden PCI DSS risks in everyday AI use. And maybe for listeners who don't know what is PCI DSS, is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. But before that, Trevor, could you tell us a short story about yourself, your career path, and what brought you to where you are right now? And perhaps maybe what Witness AI are up to these days?
Yeah, thank you so much. So, my name is Trevor Welsh. So, as you mentioned, I lead product at Witness AI. I've been in cybersecurity for quite a while. So, I guess 20 something years. I started out in the federal industry, and then I moved into the enterprise industry, and I developed a really high degree of empathy for people that have to go and just be the defenders every single day, because you don't get to have an off day. And on the compliance side, I also was involved in compliance as well. On both sides of the compliance world, so very much understand and kind of sympathize there as well. But really eager to go and have a really good chat. For Witness AI. Witness AI is a pretty amazing company. I kind of look at this as like, I think the reality is Witness AI can actually be almost like a PCI DSS firewall. And I think that's a pretty amazing thing, especially as it pertains to generative AI. And, the reality is that, the PCI standard doesn't wait for AI regulation. It's already considering, AI systems to be in the scope, especially if they impact cardholder data. So it's something that's very much on my mind.
Mm-hmm. So let's dive into it directly. So can you tell us a little bit for kind of not very much people who know about what is PCI DSS 4.0 and what are the major and hidden risks in this?
Yeah, most definitely. So broadly, many companies in the United States that handle any kind of cardholder data. That cardholder data, can be a lot of things, by the way. A lot of folks think about just credit cards. Well, there's also things like transaction logs, magnetic stripe data. There's many different types actually. And what happened was the credit card companies, and kind of, broad payment card industry companies, adjacencies came together and they said, look, if we're going to go and process credit cards for these retail companies or for anybody who wants to accept a credit card, we can't have all this fraud all over the place, because if we have all this fraud all over the place, it puts our businesses at risk, right? So if I'm MasterCard and Acme Co doesn't handle cardholder data well at all, they have no standards at all, and then Acme Co gets popped and credit cards get stolen and there's charges all over the place, well, my subscribers are not going to be responsible for those charges. So where does the money come from? And what the PCI working body said is they said, look, we need to go and have a way of standardizing, the way by which cardholder data and cardholder environments are protected. And that's exactly what they did. We're now on 4.01 of the PCI DSS standard. It was released last year. And broadly, it seeks to go and create an enclave around PCI data and then ensure that it's handled in a very, very consistent way. And that protects cardholder members. It protects, the actual credit card companies. And additionally, it protects, the retailers and those that want to accept and process credit cards as well. Broadly, it's a pretty great thing, honestly, but there's a lot of pieces to it. It can be pretty complex, and figuring out things that are in scope and out of scope, it takes a lot of expertise, which is why a big industry is almost sprung up around it.
Mhm. Yeah, so I know also the black box problem. So because many AI models operate as a black box, and also IT companies,
Yes.
so we making it difficult to understand how they process
Yes.
data or arrive at decision. So how does this lack of transparency create hidden vulnerabilities in industry, particularly regarding auditability and accountability for cardholder and data handling?
That is a great question. So, it's really interesting. The black box problem with regards to AI models is a really, really significant one. And what's been happening is that a lot of AI companies, when I say AI companies, think about people who make models, are very, very hesitant to put themselves in scope for obvious reasons. So what they tell their subscribers is, hey, we are not PCI equipped. We are not PCI regulated. Do not send us any cardholder data of any kind or any PCI DSS regulated data of any kind. If you do, that's your fault and it's on you fully. And historically, what's happened is if you're a big enough company, even when companies said that to you, you could kind of say, well, if you want our contract, sorry, you need to adhere to PCI and we need the ability to have auditability, et cetera. And that hasn't happened so far. So when we did our research for the paper, we realized actually there was only one model that actually adhered to PCI DSS. And at least at the time of writing, no other ones did. All of them just sort of said, don't send us PCI DSS data. And, that's historically not how things have worked. So it's a giant change.
Mhm. And what about data leakage and training? Because these models trained on vast data sets, and what are the specific risk associated with model leakages, for example,
Mhm.
when inadvertently memorizes AI inadvertently memorizes and exposes sensitive cardholder data?
Yeah. So Boris, I think there's two things that to touch on there, right? Now I want to put a bifurcation between them, right? So thing one is kind of, hey, what if there's a public model out there? ChatGPT is a classic one. And I'm I'm a software engineer and I've got debug logs and they contain a whole bunch of magnetic stripe data. And I paste it in. I don't really realize, and now ChatGPT has that magnetic stripe data, which by the way is definitely a PCI violation. You cannot do that. That's one thing. Um, there's another thing though, which is interesting, and you kind of touched on it as well, and I think it's really smart. Is suppose that I'm actually a credit card company, and or I'm a financials company, whatever it happens to be, a credit grantor of some kind, and I want to create a new model to assess creditworthiness. And the way I do it though is I take a whole whack of subscriber data and I run the subscriber data. I create a big model. It's made by an ML ops team, which by the way are probably not trained on PCI and they're not audited. But I create a new model based upon cardholder data. And now there's a really interesting problem about the training problem that you kind of brought up, which is, well, if if there's PCI data in the training data, then the model by nature is now actually in scope. And then how do I expose that model? In other words, what applications are now going to go and touch that model? Because now each of those applications are in scope and the places they exist are in scope. So it's actually a really difficult problem. I can tell you that, I at one point had a conversation with a pretty big bank in the United States, and they were doing exactly this. And I actually went and I gave my own profile. I was a customer of theirs. This is dead true. I gave my profile. I said, well, I'm this old. I'm this. Like, what do you think of my creditworthiness? And it literally went back and it gave me private details about myself that it should have never known. Now, to keep in mind, like I manipulated the model insofar as, to kind of discern these things. But the reality is the data was in there, and it was accessible. It was not fuzzed or changed in any way. And I remember the ML Ops team, and they were like, "Oh, yeah, I thought we changed a whole bunch of numbers a little bit to make it not." And I said, like, that doesn't change everything, right? If you took cardholder data and you change every digit by one, it doesn't make it not cardholder data.
Mhm.
Um, so it was a really interesting example, but that really is two pieces of it, though. And I can tell you that both of those are happening every day.
Interesting. So, How about third-party AI integration? Because I see in our days that more people rely on third parties, and everything is connected. So, what are the critical considerations and potential PCI DSS pitfalls when integrating these solutions?
Yeah, I think there's two interesting things at work. Thing one is you're absolutely right. AI is integrated everywhere, right? I think every single company has come up with an AI version, AI chat, AI this, AI queries, and mostly, a lot of these are pretty useful things, or at very least they're trending to be useful. Maybe there's early forays, and they're getting more useful over time. The other side of it though is really interesting, which is, you didn't raise this point, but I'll raise it, is kind of like agentic. So agentic AI, MCP, what we call A to A or agent to agent. These are also really interesting because they can also, both of these interfaces, by the way, can exchange PCI data. So, but if we look at the first one, why is it a hidden risk? Well, for a lot of people, particularly employees of companies that are just doing their jobs, when they're in Windows 11, and Windows 11 has Microsoft Copilot. It's right there, Windows 11 Copilot. You can click your start bar. And the big thing about it is it feels embedded, right? It feels like it's just inside of Windows. And I can click anything inside of Windows, right? It's inside of Windows. And when folks are doing queries there, when it's summarize this and things like that, if they're leveraging cardholder data, it's a gigantic problem. And there's a lot of things that can come up. It's not just cardholder data, right? It's all kinds of regulated data. I have personally seen numerous people go and leverage Windows 11 Copilot, looking at PCI data for whatever reason. But there's another interesting one that people really aren't used to, and maybe this is the one you're kind of getting at. Office 365, so Copilots. These things are not in your browser, right? Just like Windows 11 Copilot, not in your browser. And Office 365 Copilot, imagine that I take a document and it contains, a whole bunch of cardholder data or cardholder summarized data. I take that and I'm just using Microsoft Word. Well, Office 365 Copilot is right there. Any query that happens to Office 365 Copilot will actually go and reference the original document and shoot it right in, into Microsoft, the Microsoft Copilot, models and infrastructure. Immediately, that's a full PCI DSS violation. And that was just somebody doing their job inside of Office, right? So these things are really hidden, and they're not the way people are used to thinking.
Mhm. So let's discuss about governance, proactive or reactive compliance. Given the rapid evolution of AI, many organizations are struggling to keep pace with the compliance implication. What are the key elements of a proactive AI governance framework that can help businesses identify and mitigate hidden these risks of PCI DSS before they are actually discovered by auditors? Or worse, by malicious actors?
Yeah. So I think like if I had to go and break it down, the controls are pretty crisp, right? So reading PCI DSS, there's really three things that you have to do proactively. One of them is data protection controls. So this would be any prompts, which are your queries out to the models. They need to be scanned prior to going to the models, and any kind of sensitive info needs to be redacted, blocked, whatever. Even better if you can go and notify the employee, letting them know that, hey, that thing that you just did contains cardholder data. Witness AI, that's something that we do. To me, that's almost the best thing, because a lot of people don't know that. Like when I'm just using Office 365 or Copilots or whatever it happens to be, like I didn't know. I mean, or it's a corporate tool. I thought I could do that. So you need to be able to go and scrub that sensitive info, the PANs, CVV. I mean, all of that stuff needs to go and be scrubbed in real time. Like it can't be after, it can't be post facto. Second thing, integration for identities. PCI is very strict about identity. So integrating with Entra, integrating with Okta, enforcing role-based access control, multi-factor authentication, least privilege, no shared accounts, all of that stuff needs to be really crisp. PCI is very, very crisp about identity. The final thing that I would touch on for thing three is logging and audit trails. You have to log every AI prompt, and you have to log those responses. You need user attribution. It's got to be tamper evident, and you've got to meet PCI audit standards, right? Standard 10.2.1 and 10.7.1 are pretty crisp when it comes to auditing. Um, those are the three things that you need to be able to do to use AI safely. Now, that's maybe the really crisp thing for PCI. But I think if you even go back before that, most companies are struggling just to understand, and this is kind of to your point, what AI even exists in my environment. If I don't even know what AI exists, I can't control anything. And that's such an important part. So the concept of like cataloging and discovery, is something that most of our customers, that was their first job. I mean, one of the largest companies in the world said, we don't even know what AI exists across our 200,000 customers or our 200,000 employees. We're not even sure what they're using. So we solved that for them. Giant airline, and they're like, we don't know what's even being used right now. Let's solve that. And then you can go and solve like all of the PCI and regulatory stuff. But I think it's key to have these guardrails.
Fantastic. So, Trevor, I would like to ask you a personal point of view. What is the major misconception in this field of PCI DSS that you kind of strongly disagree with?
Um, I think, if I go back to my time, as a QSA, I think the number one thing that a lot of companies think is that if you don't know, it doesn't matter. Like there was this old joke when I was working in the federal space. They would go, "Don't show me that because if I see it, now I have to deal with it." And I thought that was a federal thing. Like I thought that was just a stupid thing that we did in federal. It's not. It's very pervasive, even in very big companies where it's like, "Hey, if I don't see it, it doesn't matter." And I actually had a company tell me not too long ago, maybe the start of the year, and they said, "Oh, well, if I don't use Witness AI and if I'm not even logging all the AI stuff, then there's no evidence that anybody's sending cardholder data out there. So therefore it's okay." And I was like, that's not the way that works, right? Like, it's, you don't get to tell your auditors if when somebody kind of says, "Hey, are you logging all web traffic?" Of course we are. We've been doing that since the year 2001. Okay. Are you logging all web traffic going to ChatGPT? Yes, great. Where do you store all the prompts and responses? And can you assure that none of those contain any kind of cardholder data? And if the answer is like, we don't really log these prompts and responses, and it's like, but you just told me you have all the web data, help me understand this. Or what are your compensating controls for these? That's probably the biggest misconception is if I don't know, it doesn't matter. And
All right.
that's common when new things come around. But honestly, AI is not new. It's not a new thing. So
All right. So, for example, if we take a life of a average risk or compliance manager, if there is one thing that they should start to prioritize right now, what would that be?
yeah, two steps. One, know what AI is being used in your environment. And then I wrote a GRC white paper, about exactly this governance risk compliance for AI. I wrote this, going back several months ago. What it does is it provides a framework for going and classifying AI. In other words, hey, is this AI domestic? Is this AI from overseas? Is this AI subject to regulation? Is it not? Who uses this? What type of data goes there? Knowing your environment is the first role of somebody who's in compliance. I have to know my environment. I then need to understand what I've paid for. Do we subscribe to these? Do we pay for them? If I'm leveraging Salesforce, for example, have I subscribed to Einstein? If I have, it could see some very interesting data that could be pertinent. So understanding what I'm subscribing to. And then the next thing I need to do is I need to uncover all shadow AI. Shadow AI is everywhere, right? There is random people right now that are using Boris.ai that cropped up 10 minutes ago to go and do some kind of awesome summarization for compliance. That happens every time. If I don't know that Boris AI exists, then I can't know what data goes there. So that would really be my advice. So it's like understand your environment, understand what people are doing in real life. And the next thing is, quite frankly, you need to figure out how you're logging prompts and responses, the data going out, the data coming back. If you do that, you're halfway there.
All right, Trevor, thank you. That's were all my questions. Perhaps if I forgot to ask you something that you think is important to our audience, please go ahead.
Yeah, 1,000%. So, Boris, thank you so much. I mean, This is something I'm really passionate about because I love the idea of AI impacting people's lives. Like I recently we worked with this really big company, and they had ChatGPT turned off. Like there was a firewall rule just forbidding ChatGPT across 200,000 employees. And I remember, we got them all set up, and I think, call it like a week, all of a sudden Witness AI went and provided all of this visibility. The reason I say this is that they literally turned off the firewall rule for disabling ChatGPT across a giant multinational company. And instantly you've had a giant amount of people using it, doing things faster, getting responses back faster, and they had the visibility they need to do it. And I look at that, and it's such a poignant example of why we do this. It's a pretty incredible thing. It's just AI just needs to be used in a responsible way. You can't let it go crazy, but the magic is real. And I think Witness AI kind of enables people to go to Hogwarts before they use the magic wand, so to speak.
All right, fantastic. Thank you again. And I wish you and your company, Witness AI, great success. And perhaps we can uh, cooperate further with global risk community and your staff to understand how it works.
It'd be an absolute pleasure, Boris. Thank you so much for your time.